Ukrainian army carried out extensive attacks on military installations on Russian soil. Operations continue unabated. It was seen that Ukrainian army made large shipments to the Bakhmut border. As a result of attacks on Russian ammunition depots, explosions occur one after another. The Russian ammunition depot organized by the operations has been burning for 20 hours. The intensity of trench warfare has increased significantly. Air defense systems were activated. Russia is trying to attack with drones. In this process, it was stated that Russian pilots wanted to go on duty. Russian soldiers and officers began to leave the army. Moscow's problems with experienced soldiers began to grow like an avalanche. Confession statements from detainees who were taken to Russian army through mobilization. The true face of war has been revealed. With the early hours of the morning, Ukrainian army took action. With the capture of Bakhmut by Ukrainian forces, shipments continued to be made to the region. According to the statements of Russian media, a large number of armored vehicles and tanks were deployed on the Bakhmut border. Russian media described the shipments as dangerous. With the shipments, conflict broke out both in Bakhmut and in the cities on Russian border. We know that Ukrainian army has been conducting operations against Russian factories, ammunition depots, and military facilities on the border for weeks. It was announced that the Ukrainian army destroyed 2 command centers and 2 industrial facilities on the Russian border with 4 cruise missiles. Armed forces of Ukraine announced that attacks on military facilities will continue. Kiev wants to cut off Russia's supply to the Eastern Front and stop armored vehicle repair facilities. For this reason, successive operations have been carried out with HIMARS and MLRS multiple rocket launcher systems for about 10 days. However, no steps were taken from Russian army to stop these attacks. With the new air defense systems being sent to the front, Russian warplanes cannot approach the front line to destroy their rocket systems. This ensures that Russia's border command centers are neutralized one by one. In this process, Ukrainian army repelled all of the Russian attacks in 25 districts. Russian army carried out 5 missiles and 16 air strikes on the Eastern Front. They also launched attacks on Ukrainian positions with 61 rockets. Ukrainian armed forces reported that the attacks were repelled and about 2 kilometers of progress had been made. While the trench warfare continues, it is very difficult for the armies to advance. For this reason, it is very important to advance 2 kilometers on the front line. Ukrainian Air Force, on the other hand, carried out 10 attacks on Russian personnel, weapons and military equipment clusters, and 12 attacks on anti-aircraft missile system positions in the last 24 hours. Ukraine's rocket forces and artillery units struck a Russian ammunition storage point, 3 command centers, and 10 troop groups. On the other hand, Ukrainian army carried out rocket attacks in the Kharkiv region of Luhansk. As a result of the attacks, Russian army lost a large ammunition depot. With the explosion of the ammunition depot, a big fire broke out in the area. It was stated that the fire could not be extinguished for about 20 hours. As a result of the operations, 30 artillery systems, a large number of artillery shells, 11 multiple rocket launchers, a large number of rockets, and the fuel in the ammunition tanks became unusable. Russian army lost 610 more soldiers in one day. Ukrainian General Staff announced the losses of Russian army in one day. According to the statements made, Russian army lost 8 tanks, 6 armored vehicles, 32 artillery systems, 1 warplane, 1 helicopter, 9 unmanned aerial vehicles, 9 fuel tankers, and 2 special equipment. Russian army continues to suffer consecutive losses. This situation greatly affects both the front line and the Kremlin. The morale of Russian soldiers fighting at the front is quite low right now. Russian army has not been able to achieve victory for a long time. In addition, Russian forces are losing hundreds of soldiers every day. Kiev's making new deals and the continuation of shipments caused a great lack of motivation in Russia. In this process, tensions between Russia and NATO began to rise again. Both Russia and NATO have warned of the potential for conflict in recent weeks. In an interview with Norwegian broadcaster NRK in early December, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said he undoubtedly feared that NATO and Russia could engage in a major war over Ukraine. Stoltenberg said, "I am afraid that the war in Ukraine will get out of control and turn into a major war between NATO and Russia. If things go wrong, it could go very badly," Stoltenberg added, adding that concerns will increase. On the other hand, Konstantin Sivkov, who is known to be close to the Kremlin, urged Moscow to prepare more missiles for a confrontation against NATO. "Given that a conflict with NATO is inevitable in the near future, we need to produce more powerful and modern weapon systems," said Sivkov. "In this process, countries need to be more understanding, because the violence of the ongoing war on Ukrainian soil is increasing day by day. However, it seems very difficult to reach an agreement among the leaders, because Putin still says Ukraine must surrender and meet the Kremlin's conditions. For this reason, Western countries and Ukraine announced that the negotiations were suspended for a long time. Regardless, Putin will try anything to achieve a victory in Ukraine. We know that the losses of Russian army reached a critical point in this process. Russian army loses an average of 600 soldiers every day. Even in this process, Putin mobilized the prisoners and sent them to the front. And trained prisoners who joined Wagner Group either fled from the front or surrendered to Ukrainian army. It is said that many Russian prisoners surrendered to Ukrainian army and made very important confessions. Moscow promises prisoners a salary of $8,500 and a return to normal life after the war. That's why many Russian prisoners accept the terms and go to the front. A soldier serving in the Wagner Group recently surrendered to Ukrainian army and made confessions. Prisoners tell untrained Russian soldiers and prisoners that the war in Ukraine has been won. The Kremlin says that the war with soldiers of Western countries on the territory of Ukraine was entered and won. But when we went to the front, we saw this clearly. We sent 16 people to be sent to the front. We were left in a forest on Ukrainian soil, and they said we had to seize a gas station up ahead. However, before we could reach the gas station, we were attacked by Ukrainian army and surrendered. We explained that we were imprisoned at the front after our capture and that we had to. They treated us very well, gave us shelter and food. We had many meetings with Ukrainian authorities and we saw the real face of the war in Ukraine. Me and many of my friends have been deceived. We can no longer go back to our country. After Putin declared mobilization, a large number of prisoners were drafted into the army. However, the vast majority of soldiers sent to the front do not even know why they are fighting. The Kremlin puts a lot of pressure on those who need to be recruited as part of the mobilization. It is clear that the Kremlin is exerting great pressure. Hundreds of warplanes belonging to Russian army can actively serve. However, it was reported that the Russian pilots did not want to go to the mission. As I mentioned, many soldiers do not even know what they are fighting for on Ukrainian soil. In the report, which appeared in the Western media today, when Russian and Ukrainian air forces were compared in detail, it was stated that despite all the shortcomings, the intelligent defense of Ukrainian forces was effective and Russian pilots were extremely reluctant. Aggressively enter Ukrainian airspace. It is quite normal that Russian army cannot achieve air dominance in this process, and it will be very difficult for them to achieve air dominance after this process. The tension is increasing day by day.